Rise on the Hill is your local election headquarters. We've been following the races in Virginia closely, but that is not the only place where people are preparing to head to the polls.
Washington correspondent Drew Petrimo here to talk about some of the other high-profile races and referendums happening around the country. Good morning to you, Drew.
Morning. How are we?
Not too bad. We started in New Jersey and New York City last hour. Let's talk about California because this was an election day that nobody thought was coming until Texas decided to redistrict. Where are we at right now?
It's kind of a big day on multiple fronts in California. One, you look at just the referendum itself. This is an attempt by Democrats to negate some of the moves that Republicans have made to give themselves an advantage going into the midterm elections next year. If Democrats can pick up some seats there, that could have a big impact on the balance of power going into, as we see it play out in the midterm elections next year. The other way I kind of look at this is the aura of Gavin Newsom, really trying to build his public profile. Many people think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to run for president in 2028. There were some doubters that thought maybe it would be difficult for him to undo the commission-based system they have for drawing districts there, at least temporarily. But the polling shows that he's likely to win in this referendum and be able to redraw those districts, and then this is just a temporary move. They would eventually go back to that commission. But I think it's a flex for Governor Newsom as he tries to build this national profile ahead of 2028.
Well, let's show you how many people in California seem to be supporting this. Right now, the measure appears likely to pass, as you were saying. 60% of likely voters were supporting Proposition 50, which is a significant number of people. There were some folks, some people in California who were thinking, you know, there still are some people in the middle that could be persuaded not to, particularly in the agriculture sector. But that remains to be seen because if that poll is correct, they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and Republicans kind of pulled back a little bit in some of their support, especially when it comes to the money that some of these big Republicans and Republican groups were pouring into it. Kind of reading the tea leaves, seeing the poll numbers, it hasn't been the all-out political warfare with money coming really from both sides and really trying to fight this out. Eventually, I think that some of the major Republican donors and groups that were inclined to get involved in this fight saw the polling and decided that their money is probably better spent elsewhere.
Yeah.
Another statewide race with some national implications is the Supreme Court race in Pennsylvania. We saw how contested the one in Wisconsin was in the last election cycle. Well, now you got 3 Democrats trying to hang on to seats. They currently have that 5-2 split. And these courts handle some very significant cases with national implications.
Especially Pennsylvania, right? Probably the #1 swing state. You could see a future where there's an election that hangs on recounts and stuff like we saw in Florida. The Supreme Court ends up becoming very important in that. Right now, there is a majority for Democrat-aligned candidates of 5-2 rather. President Trump weighing in the last days of this election, urging people to vote no on those 3 candidates. It would lead to a split for a few years until they're able to reelect new members, and that could kind of just grind the gears of the state Supreme Court and really slow things down and then really open up to wide open races in 2026 and 2028.
So let's talk about New York. There's this mayoral's race, and there's this guy named Zohran Mamdani, and apparently, according to the polls, he's going to do pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a remarkable rise for Mamdani, who entered this race as an unknown. I was watching a video last night of these interviews he did after the 2024 election, going to some of the districts where President Trump did better and Republicans were starting to gain support. And he's basically just standing out there on a street corner talking to people. Nobody really knows who he is. He's this unassuming young guy, but really was able to use social media and he's a very excellent communicator, kind of gets the vibe, understands how to talk to people in a very online and, young, connected city like New York, absolutely able to capitalize on new media and reaching voters in these new ways. And I think it's probably a foregone conclusion that he wins. It's politics, so you never know what's going to happen. It'd be really interesting to see the lessons that Democrats take from this. Look, his politics are not going to work all over the country. He's extremely liberal, but the way he's able to reach voters directly, the way he kind of comes naturally to the social media game and is able to connect with voters in that way because he's young, because he's online, that's something that I think not just Democrats, but Republicans will look to in the future as a way to build campaigns.
But Bernie Sanders was that way too, right? I mean, and people grew to love him across the country as social democrat. So I'm not saying that everybody's going to love Zohran Mamdani, but there may be a little more coattails than we anticipate.
Look, if he can be successful and he can give off if people end up thinking that he's doing a good job in New York City and he speaks to issues that people can relate to, I think in today's day and age, the label socialist is not as powerful as it once was.
Yeah, we'll see if policy promises can be delivered in New York City by Mamdani. Drew, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Drew.